study it because it was a symptom of climate change. Like the Earth is sick, right?
Right.
The Earth is like a patient. I consider the Earth my patient. and I go to the symptomatic areas, and when ice shelves start to break apart, we want to know why. So first thing we had to do is figure out how to dive in water that cold. This is me diving through a crevasse in the iceberg itself, and all those ripples you see on the side, that's what happens to ice when it's down there. So we found some interesting discoveries. We found fish that actually lived inside the ice. They bored little holes in the ice and would sit there living in water that was actually below what would freeze fresh water, because seawater freezes at a lower temperature.
Right.
And this is, so I went down there, wrote a book about it, a National Geographic article. It was a TV documentary made, and this was a way to do research, but also sort of communicate out. Another big area for me is seamounts. Now, most people don't know it, but there are actually more mountains in the ocean than there are on land. And they're of the same scale.
Makes sense. I mean, most of our planet is covered in oceans.
That's right. 70% of the Earth is ocean. And the geology is, if you were to drain the oceans, it would kind of look like, most of it would be these long, flat plains. They're called abyssal plains in the ocean. And then these amazing, ridges of mountains and mountain ranges. And we've only been to, we don't even know how many seamounts there are. Do you know that? We actually only know about some of the seamounts because when satellites, and I know space is your thing,
Right.
when satellites go over the Earth and measure gravity, they detect a gravity anomaly in one spot. And they
Right.
say, there's a lot of mass there. There must be a seamount there. So these seamounts are very important for the ocean because most currents in the ocean run horizontally, and when they hit a seamount that's like 10,000 feet high, it'll swirl around the seamount and create life. So I've gone diving in them in submarines. This is a volcano off the coast of Costa Rica. And I was just off Hawaii recently looking at some new seamounts out there. And this is a Pacific sleeper shark. This is one of the deep sea sharks. You don't find these in shallow water. And I've only seen it once before, and the two times I saw this species, it did exactly the same thing. I think it was a she. Well, it's hard to tell with sharks. She came over to the submarine, and I'm looking out a little porthole about this big, and very curious about the sub. And I think, they probably, not probably, she would have never seen a submarine before, right?
Right.
So it's like, what is this?
She's just checking it out.
Well, yeah, and they have a brain about the size of a pack of cigarettes, right? So it's probably trying to figure out what can I do with it,
Right,
Can I
right.
mate with it? Can I eat it? And then suddenly she disappeared from view, and then she popped right down in the porthole.
Oh my gosh.
and was looking right in at me, really kind of
That-
sweet in her own way.
Can't even imagine seeing that eye.
I took this with my cell phone too, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, great. So, I mean, obviously, it's very clear you love the oceans, but as our talk is about, we have some problems with the oceans, and
We do.
so maybe give us an overview of what are the challenges that we're facing with our waterways right now.
Well, Lauren, the reason that my career turned away from pure research into conservation was I was in a submarine off the coast of Japan, in the Sea of Japan, about 25 years ago. And I got down to 18,000 feet. Now, this is a place that has never seen the light of day in billions of years.
Wow.
And certainly no one's been there. And this is what I saw. I saw garbage. Well, first
I was
I
like,
saw
wow,
this.
that's really
I know,
beautiful
we're coming to the
garbage.
garbage. First I saw this. This is actually what the ocean is full of. This is really exciting. The ocean, if aliens came from another planet and wanted to know who Earthlings were, based on abundance, they would go to the ocean. And they would meet creatures like this. Some of these are new. This is a new species that I helped discover in the Pacific. I call that the Darth Vader jellyfish. I mean, there's things down there that are wildest than, they're like nature's dreams. They're really beyond what you can think of. But then on this one particular dive, I got down to the very bottom and I saw this, which just appalled me. It would
And this
have
is
been
18,000 feet
yeah.
below sea level.
18,000 feet. Now, I don't want to make you think the whole ocean bottom is like this. It's not. This was a particularly bad spot. But the fact that we've delivered trash to places that we haven't even been to yet really turned turned me. And a couple of years later, I got out of traditional oceanography and into trying to find solutions for how we're trashing the oceans. And it's not just an aesthetic. It's not just because we grew up with the right value system. It's actually a necessity. It's a survival for humans, because we've started on this planet some millions of years ago, and we've adapted to it. And the oceans are the reason the Earth is a nice place to live. This is a graphic that shows currents traveling in the ocean. It's just an amazing system. The currents act like a heating system for the Earth. And that current you see in the Atlantic there, that's the Gulf Stream. And the Gulf Stream is what makes Europe a nice place to live. Without the Gulf Stream bringing that warmth from the equator up, northern Europe would be like Alaska or Antarctica. And that current is at risk right now of becoming disrupted because of the changes that we've done to the atmosphere with heating. As a matter of fact, it's slowed down already 30% in the last 30 years. So climate is one thing that we've been doing to our oceans. And this is the microscopic life that supports the oceans and ultimately supports us. The molecules that start off in this plankton ends up in us through various systems. And we have never, as a species, woken up to this. And I know you like space, so do I. And when we got up into space, we saw this.
Right.
It was all blue.
Space gives us the best view of our world, so it is connected.
Space gives us the best view, and it was Buckminster Fuller who saw this, and he called it Spaceship Earth. Traveling 67,000 miles an hour around the sun. We will never be resupplied. Everything we've ever had, everything we ever will have is here in one form or another. And it's mostly governed by the ocean. But we didn't wake up when we saw that. And then we went to the moon. Do you remember, do you know who took this shot? Little space trivia? Bill Anders.
Right.
Astronaut and engineer Bill Anders.
Yeah.
Apollo, I think it was 10, or maybe 11.
It'd be after 11.
Yeah, anyway, he looked through the rearview mirror, basically, of the spacecraft, took this shot of Earthrise. Again, it's blue. Here's this blue sphere out there. Still didn't wake up. And then Voyager, Carl Sagan, requested that the Voyager spacecraft turn its camera back as it left the solar system to take a self-portrait. That's the Earth, blue dot, famous picture, blue. 1 pixel on that image, and it happens to be blue. But the good news is that we have woken up. And today, and by the way, all the water on the planet in the ocean is about that volume. There's not much of it.
Wow.
There's not much of it. And it's the life support system of this spacecraft. So, I mean, what are we doing to it? We're overfishing it. We're turning it acidic with CO2.
Right.
We're destroying the complex biological systems in it with what we're up to. We're throwing material that we've created, like plastic and others, and PCBs, these chemicals that humans are amazing. Anything we touch, we can transform through our ingenuity, and then we just throw it away. And it's all ending up in that sphere, and it's time to hit the brake, get into reverse, and get into a new course.
Right. But like they were saying earlier, we're about solutions at this stage, and you have a book coming out where you kind of examine how the oceans are affected by all the different industrial revolutions, which I think is so interesting because I don't really think of water when I think of the Industrial Revolution. I think of technology and whatnot. So maybe give a little idea of what you talk about in your book. Right now we're in a new industrial revolution where we're talking about AI, and kind of molding biology and robotics and stuff like that. So how can this industrial revolution affect the oceans and moving forward?
Sure. The book is called, I think there it is. It's called The Soul of the Sea in the Age of the Algorithm.
Right.
And the treatment of the book is to look at the development of humanity, of our society, of civilizations, vis-a-vis the ocean. And so the major phases in the ocean were sail, and then we went from wood to coal, and then we went from coal to petroleum, and then there were the different uses and values of the ocean. I mean, if you go back, if you think about it, think about the first person, maybe along the coast of India or Africa, some 200,000 years ago that climbed on a log and then found a stick, put it on the log, and then scratched his head and wove a mat and put it on the stick and noticed that it would push the whole thing through the water. That would have been the beginning of the age of sail. Now, who could have connected that act with a small country in the North Atlantic, England, ruling the world, 200,000 years later? Or slavery, or the transportation of goods, or the global expansion of our population. So whenever there's an innovation, the book tracks these periods of time in our history.
Could we say there's a ripple effect?
Yeah, it's good. And it's
it.
very deep
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Yeah,
Right.
too. It's a deep effects.
Right.
So I got very interested with my co-author, I don't know if he's Nishan Degarian, he's from Mauritius, on the fourth industrial revolution, which we see outside the window here. And how this book is a manifesto, really. It doesn't give detailed instructions on exactly what kind of automated aquaculture system to make, or what kind of autonomous freighter you should make, or what are the frequencies of the satellites that should be remote sensing the ocean real time, and the underwater systems that sense it real time so that we can model it and make decisions, which we have to do all that. It's more about making sure that we have the right value system as we head out, and that we're aware of the unintended consequences of past industrial revolutions, past changes. Now, that said, I am particularly excited about this one. I think was Henry Ford used to say that when he was out talking to people about things, he'd ask them what they want, and they said they wanted faster horses. That's as far as their thinking could go. And I think that's where we're at now with this. I think people are still thinking about faster horses when they look out at these computer systems, and that there's a step change about to happen. That if we focus it, and we think about it, and we make the right decisions, we're going to end up in a world where people and the ocean can coexist in the modern world and support each other. Now we can dive into any of that I just said, but that's the broad narrative.
Right, but I think when we were talking, you mentioned not necessarily dictating exactly the route to take, but to have different focuses on what we need to achieve.
Right.
So what would you say are some of the big things that we need to set as goals? Not necessarily how we do them, but what we need to achieve.
I think that we need to be able to monitor the ocean real time in order to, think of it like an avatar. You should be able to, you should, and I should, and especially heads of countries and whatnot, should be able to go click a button on their computer and say, okay, what's happening in my ocean today? Where are the tuna spawning? Where's that oil rig that's out there drilling? And how much plastic is there in the ocean today? And how do we adjust it? It's almost like we need a dashboard for planet Earth. It's like your car. It's a spaceship dashboard. And we need to know what's happening within that so that we can course correct as we go along.
And what is the state of that technology right now?
It is very disorganized. It's very nascent. It's undirected. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of you want to know where you're going and then get what you need to get there. But back to the not getting too prescripted, we talked the other day about Christopher Columbus. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were trying to help him get to the New World and you spent all your time designing an anchorage in Miami Harbor or New York Harbor or New Orleans, you would have completely been wrong.
Right.
But if you had said, hey, Chris, I know you're going to find something. As long as you keep going in that direction, and you should have some good sails, make sure you bring a lot of fresh water, a good compass, and keep control of whatever the broad support systems are, then he will get to where he or she needs to go. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where we are with this. I just gave you one example about the monitoring the ocean. Other things we need to feed. We need to feed up to 9 billion people soon. And the current production systems we have ain't gonna do it.
Yeah.
It just ain't gonna do it. And really the ocean is where we have to look. So there's another broad direction. And along with that, I would say think about nutrition, think about poor people. There's a few elements there.
Great. Well, we have about a minute left. So if there's a parting thought you want to leave on, what people need to think in terms of helping our oceans, any parting thoughts for our audience today?
I would say that in a lot of ways, this is kind of back to the future. I've always been fascinated because I love maritime history. And if you go back, you find that the leaders, the real forthright people were like 19, 20 years old. Horatio Nelson, the great British commander, was 21 when he was in command of the whole Caribbean for the British Navy. Nathaniel Palmer was 19, I think, when he discovered Antarctica. And then we kind of went into this other phase where you didn't really get acknowledged, or you couldn't do anything until you were 40. Yeah. And now you look around and it's 20 and 21-year-olds that are changing the world again. That's kind of where I see this moment. And not that it excludes older people like myself, I hope, but I think we need to really embrace this moment. And this
more inclusive for everyone. Everyone can get involved, basically.
More inclusive for everyone. And I found that this new wave, I don't know what, the millennials or whatever they are very inclusive. When I was young, when I was growing up, I didn't care much about the older folks, but this younger generation really has some regard for it. So I'm very optimistic.
All right, well, that's a great note to leave on. Thank you so much, Greg.
Thank you,
and
Lauren.
thank you all for joining us today.